Originaler date, January 13th, 2018, Shadows of the Damned. The Untold Story Director's Cut combines parts 1 through 3 with new edits, information and the addition of a brand new 4th part into one feature-length presentation. Written and edited by Hikiko. Pinche cabrón. Chapters are included.
Magnifico. Our very own road movie. Friend of yours? Are you kidding?
The history behind Garcia's hellish odyssey to rescue the angelic Paula was paved with rocky beginnings, and there is a lot to cover here before we get to the game that we all know and some of us love. I want to preface this video by stating that I absolutely love Shadows of the Damned. It's one of my favorite Grasshopper titles, and I've beaten it a total of 6 times. I'm that crazy about it. However, the more I began to research the history of this game, the more hard truths I began to uncover. And then after going through it again with this new knowledge, I started to notice things that I had never paid attention to before. The truth about this game has to be told sometime, and unfortunately I'm the messenger here. So please, don't get the message twisted. I love the game, it's worth playing, but the whole story is a clusterfuck nightmare of epic proportions. There are some vague details about its history, either from an NDA or people keeping their lips shut. So I did the best I could with what I got. I'll address the more speculatory moments when they come, and you should take them with an extreme grain of salt. You see, Suda had an entirely different vision for this project, and according to the man himself, the initial concept for Shadows was rejected 4 times by EA before it culminated into the final product. Shadows of the Damned is so far removed from any prior Grasshopper title in the writing, structure, style, gameplay, and the plethora of concessions the developers made at the behest of its publisher. It ends up coming off as a clone of more successful games to come before it. Metaphorically speaking, it's like an indie band trying to formulate a hit song that would appeal to mainstream listeners by abandoning their signature style, which garnered their cult status in the first place. Shadows is a focus-tested, company man elevator pitch product that was overseen by an auteur at financial gunpoint and led by a ghost director whom was in charge of a team of Japanese developers that had no prior experience working in the Unreal Engine. This is a tale where East met West that ended tragically with a higher count of dead concepts and dreams than demons. This is the untold story of Shadows of the Damned. I remember when Shadows of the Damned was first announced. It was pitched as a Suda 51 trip and was touted as having a dream team of developers behind the game. That dream team was comprised of Grasshopper's Suda 51,
Shadows of the Damned.
Resident Evil's Shinji Mikami, and Silent Hill's Akira Yamoka providing the soundtrack. And quite frankly, this is a dream team to me, and you're reminded of this collaboration every time you boot the game through sweeping camera angles and title cards and monster growls. Ooh! Despite what you may have heard, Shadows of the Damned is not the first title that Shinji and Suda worked on together. For those unfamiliar, Killer 7 marked their first collaboration, and when comparing the development story stories of these two separate projects and the resulting games, it's clear to me that the shortcomings of Shadows of the Damned were rooted in two drastically different working environments, more so than incompetence coming from either creator. What was so different about that collaboration that ended up giving us the quintessential Grasshopper title? What went so right? As the legend goes, it all started with a phone call from Shinji Mikami, whom was heading up the Capcom 5 project at the time, and he was seeking out developers to help with creating unique GameCube titles. He said, "Let's make a game together," and I immediately said, "Certainly." Now, Suda was nervous about this collaboration, as he idolized Mikami. You see, Mikami was a legend in the games industry at this point, and at the peak of his career for making Goof Troop on the Super Nintendo. Oh, and for being one of the fathers of survival horror, but that's kind of a minor thing. During the production of Killer 7, Shinji acted as the supervisor of the game and acted as a mentor figure for Suda by encouraging Suda to fully design the game by himself from scratch in order to be a truly original creation. This collaboration was a dream come true for Suda, and he wanted to follow in the footsteps of his mentor by creating something truly innovative. When I decided to work with Mikami, I decided that I too should make a game from scratch. I thought making a distinction from things like clone games and copy games is necessary, so I started from scratch, including the button arrangements and everything else. It's a game that I made completely through trial and error. Suda recalls the environment he worked in during Killer 7's production allowed him to fully realize his vision. It was an environment full of encouragement, completely open to creativity, and he owed it all to Shinji Mikami. At that point, Mikami entrusted the making of the entire game to me. I think I was probably protected by him, even from Capcom. When the release date was pushed back, he provided an environment that let me create everything that I wanted to create. That kind of development is rather rare. The level of satisfaction from making that game was incredibly high. Truly, I feel that Mikami really protected me all the way. Even now, I'd like to do another project like this again. As a result of Mikami's encouragement, Killer 7 became a wholly original creation by Suda51. It's a title that is distinctly his own and one that is beyond comparison. It put Grasshopper Manufacture on the map and made Suda51 a semi-obscure household name. In contrast, I cannot say the same for Shadows of the Damned. Oh yeah, Akira Yamoka was also a member of this dream team. He's even listed on the back of the box. He must be important. What can I say here? Akira is just usually happy to be making music at all, and he just seems to be enthusiastic for whatever project comes his way. Whatever project. Shadows marked his second work with Grasshopper, his first being No More Heroes 2, and he would later become a regular music producer for the company, filling in for the absence of Masafumi Takada. He even wanted to pitch a sequel to Shadows of the Damned to EA. Man, I'd love to hear what he had prepared. But he's kept it a secret all these years later. In retrospect, I think Akira was the only person to walk away from this project with his dream fully realized. He even got a band out of the deal by forming the supergroup that he refers to as the Silent Hill Band, which is comprised of Mary Elizabeth McGlynn on vocals, Troy Baker on Expensive Scarf, and Joe Ramirza on Another Plane of Existence entirely. Now that I've established all the key players in our dream team, there was one more key figure in the development of Shadows of the Damned that EA forgot to mention on the back of the box. Massimo Garani. Never heard of him? Prior to his work as director on Shadows, he was the lead design director for Open Season. Look, I understand that it's tough out there in the games industry. Everyone's gotta eat. Even Suda said that you gotta make licensed titles sometimes. But going from lead design director of Open Season to director of Shadows of the Damned doesn't exactly inspire confidence for a Grasshopper title. Perhaps I shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Well, in this case, I didn't. Cue the box, we're doing this shit. In the game, you play as Boog, the domesticated bear. He gets mixed up with Elliot, a one-antlered deer and one bad hombre.
I got something that'll make you come with me. Get a whiff of this.
He ends up robbing a convenience store for its woohoo bars. Then he gets tranked by cops and exiled to the forest, where all of the following gameplay mechanics are introduced. Pikmin-inspired deer launching. First-person bunny rabbit shooter. Bug takes a point-blank bullet to the face. Bug Kaida detonates a dirty bomb. Wearing a grass skirt and spooking a hunter until he blinks out of existence. Donkey Kong minecart flop humping, gratuitous booty shaking, body slamming a hunter into a campfire and lighting another hunter on fire. Body slamming a hunter into a bear trap. Throwing a hunter off a 3-foot cliff until he blinks out of existence. Shooting a hunter with a face-raping rabbit. Boog and Elliot fuck a snowball mechanic. Giving a smelly hunter a bath while listening to obscenely loud bluegrass music. First-person bra-propelled porcupine launcher, riding an outhouse down a wild river and waterboarding a hunter at the same time. Survival horror bear stealth mission, teaching kids to make an improvised explosive mechanic. Trapping trappers in the trapper's traps. Deer LARPs as Leatherface for a stage. Impossible physics engine. A surprisingly deep role-playing skill tree. Duck Dynasty DDR. Beaver torpedo bridge busting. Anticlimactic final boss fight, followed by a slideshow ending with bluegrass drowning out your thoughts.
Oh shit, I'm sorry.
Guarani is a literal genius and deserved a spot on the back of the box. Massimo was hired on a year into Grasshopper's deal with EA during one of the many refocusing periods of the project. And I assume that this was a move made to get someone in place that was more familiar working in Western game studios in charge. From that point forward, he was in total creative control over Shadows, with Suda overseeing some of the creative decisions Massimo would present, but ultimately, this became Massimo's project. It's evident that the end result of Shadows can be attributed to Massimo's love for B-movies. That's probably why there are so many references to movies thrown around in Shadows.
Why do I feel like I'm in a movie?
What, were you raised in a barn?
Good to know we have the same tastes.
What kind of game are you trying to make Shadows of the Dam? What kind of, what kind of experience are you trying to give to the player as you guys work on this project?
Well, I had the opportunity to influence quite a bit Shadows of the Dam with my own taste as well. I think what I personally brought to the game is that kind of like typical 80s B-movie style that you can easily see in the game.
He's personally responsible for why Shadows became known as a road movie set in hell.
Garcia Hotspur was a man that had it all. A killer motorcycle, a sweet leather jacket, and a hot girlfriend from hell.
In my mind, Shadows of the Damned is just as much a Massimo Guarani fever dream as it was a Suda51 trip. For all the flaws Shadows may have in the end result, I'm not gonna pin the blame on just one man for its shortcomings, as Massimo has more than proven himself as a visionary director. And I'm not just saying that because Open Season was so damn good. Shortly after Shadows, he left Grasshopper and went on to form his own studio, Ovo Sonico, where he developed cult indie titles like Murasaki Baby and The Last Day of June. Both are lauded for their emotional storytelling and very unique styles. It's a shame that EA didn't give this man his due praise. He was given a game halfway into development, and he basically saved the project from becoming vaporware. In the case of Shadows of the Damned, it wasn't the director behind the curtain to blame. There's a lot more to this story. In our next act, we will be taking a look at the origins of Shadows and the lost game that was killed during development. The origins of Shadows of the Damned can be traced back as far as 2006, which was 1 year after Killer 7 was released and during the dark days of Grasshopper's anime adaptation phase. With the confidence from having a minor hit on his hands, Suda set his sights on the recently announced PlayStation 3 with a new and equally ambitious concept for the platform. This project would be called Kurayami, which means darkness. In a 2006 interview with Edge magazine, Suda unveiled his concept for Kurayami. The title was set to be a free-roaming action game set in a castle town shrouded in darkness, where the protagonist would explore the village with his torch and interact with an eccentric cast of bizarre villagers. Stealth was emphasized in this game, and the hero would have to wander around in the darkness with his torch, avoiding monsters and certain death. He would only be safe in well-lit areas. German surrealist Franz Kafka served as the inspiration for the world of Kurayami, with Suda specifically stating Kafka's castle was his own attempt at adapting Kafka. I've never read The Castle, but according to Wikipedia, it's a story about a man named K, which some believe to be a Kafka self-insert character, and the story centers around K being summoned to a bizarre town that's ruled by a bureaucracy comprised of officials that operate from a large castle just outside of the village. It centers around K's frustration of trying to conduct business while being forced to follow non-transparent, seemingly arbitrary rules set by the shadow bureaucrats on the hill. K is constantly frustrated due to not being able to communicate with the castle officials despite all of his best efforts. K comes to the eventual realization that the bureaucracy is full of shit and don't know what they're talking about. The story ends mid-sentence and lacks a true resolution. Outside of the motifs of light and darkness, much of what the initial concept of Kurayami was lost in the transition to Shadows of the Damned. In Suda's own words, Kurayami's ideas are not about violence or eroticism, but fundamental problems in the human mind. A statement which seems like a far cry from the overtly violent and the walking on titties nature of Shadows. Suda held out hope that he would eventually find a publisher for Kurayami, and he continued to work on the concept for many years to come. In 2008, he presented his new ideas for Kurayami at Grasshopper's 10th anniversary party. This time around, it was intended to be more of an action RPG, wherein the protagonist could go into town, find a tailor, and make himself some new clothes. To change things up, he wanted to create a game that wasn't dependent on using guns. In this concept art, you can see a man with a lantern wandering around a dark village. Here, you can see the various evolutions of Garcia's character design. He went from a shirtless wanderer bearing a torch to an upper-class Eastern European gentleman, to Garcia Hotspur as we know him, but this time in a business suit. Although it's evident that Kurayami was the basis for Shadows of the Damned, Suda51 adamantly denied this claim during a 2009 interview with Joystick. Anything you can tell us about Kurayami? There's no real update, sorry. Is it still in development? It's not even in development right now. Is it canceled? We aren't even really working on it. We've just been talking about it, you know, but there just hasn't been time to work on it. A bunch of sites posted the artwork again, and for a while everyone thought it was new. One day, it's not canceled. haven't given up on it. One day, I'll have time to work on this title. So what's the real story? Was Kurayami a separate game from Shadows of the Damned? Or was Suda attempting to distance the two ideas by hiding the basis for Shadows, in the event that he could eventually create his initial concept in the future? Well, it was Mr. Loose Lips himself, Shinji Mikami, that was the first to publicly reveal the truth about the fate of Kurayami and its eventual transition into Shadows. No, it became a completely different game. That was a bit disappointing. I think Suda was unable to create the scenario he'd originally had in his head, and rewrote the scenario several times. I think his heart was broken. He's such a unique creator, so it seems to me that he was not quite comfortable with making this game. Bear with me, but I don't know where else to fit in this next bit, but I can't shake the feeling that Shinji accidentally or deliberately stole a bit of Suda's concept for Kurayami and repurposed it into another game. In 2010, Mikami formed Tango Gameworks and began development on The Evil Within, which is a psychological thriller about a man with a lantern wandering around a vacant, dark village. No, there's more to it than that. In the Assignment DLC, you play as Jolie, whom spends most of the campaign wandering around in the dark with her flashlight and avoiding combat. Now, there is one small shooting segment that's forced, but for the most part, you have to rely on stealth and your wits to survive this DLC. Exploration is highly emphasized over fighting this time around. Furthermore, there's even a mode in the assignment that you unlock after beating it the first time called Kurayami, wherein all the maps are shrouded in complete darkness and your flashlight is the only source of light. Shinji, you son of a bitch. This DLC must be the last we're ever gonna hear of Kurayami, right? Oh no. Suda, not one to give up on his initial vision, refocused the project into a more attainable goal by turning Kurayami into a manga known as Kurayami Dance in 2015. Here I can see the initial concept of Garcia seems to be a character in the manga. And what's this? The protagonist seems to have a silver eye. Oh, here we go again with this silver eye shit. Let's get down to brass tacks. Did Kurayami ever enter development, or was it just shot down instantly and turned into Shadows of the Damned from the get-go? Prepare yourselves for some speculation, and I'll do my best to reinforce my ideas with examples. I can't help but wonder if the opening area of Shadows of the Damned is a brief taste of what Kurayami could have been. The first time you gain control of Garcia, he wanders around an open stretch of highway with the gate to hell standing before him in the distance. If you turn around, all you're presented with is an open road shrouded in complete darkness, and you're left listening to an eerie Silent Hill-esque soundscape crafted by Yamoka that is one of the most chilling and lonely moments that the game evokes. This is one of the only times where Garcia holds Johnson as a torch without any input from the player. Was this setup a coincidence? Or was this moment symbolic of Suda turning his back on his original concept and casting Garcia into hell itself? Not exactly. I still contend that there's a lot more left over of Kurayami than many people would notice their first time around. After entering the gate to hell, it seemed to me that most, if not all, of the medieval village concept for Kurayami was repurposed into Shadows. Let's refer back to the concept art. Check out this brick awning with the Grim Reaper in front of it. Well, that awning is still here. And speaking of Grim Reapers, are the Sisters Grimm a carryover of this idea? Are they? Maybe? You can also get a glance of Fleming's castle off in the distance, just outside of the village. Remember Kafka's The Castle? Only this time around it's a large protruding penis. Close. I don't know about you, but my mental image of hell doesn't include an Eastern European castle village adorned with street lamps and torches. Why are there light bulbs in all the homes you enter? It just seems totally out of place. The abundant light is also counter to the game's logic, as the demons are weakened by light. Coming off of playing through this game 6 times, I have to admit, the entire experience feels segmented, as if the developers had initially intended for the game to be more open and free roaming, like in Kurayami's initial concept, and then when the game transitioned, they had to close off many of the interconnecting pathways. The entire experience is linear, as Garcia is forced to go through highlighted doorways and windows all the time, as if they had to dumb down the exploration in fear of the player getting lost. Oh no, I'm lost, where am I? Oh, thank God there's a crying baby door to guide me in the right direction. They also have this neat little trick to bypass the fragmented layout of town. Anytime Garcia needs to get to another part of the map with no logical junction point, they just throw in a darkness portal and he can traverse through it and exit out on the other side to place him wherever he's needed. There are even times when Fleming's hand just comes out of nowhere, grabs Garcia, and drops him into another portion of the map. As a result, the level design comes off as sloppy, with little to no cohesion, with the sole exception being the Resident Evil 4 Spanish Village that totally isn't the Resident Evil 4 Spanish Village because it's still filled with baby gates that prevent you from exploring freely. I know this segmentation could be merely written off as hell, taking whatever the shape it wants to, much like Dracula's castle in Castlevania, but with the abundance of blocked off corridors, it comes off as a last-minute compromise as a way to retrofit the already completed levels of Kurayami. The most obvious example of Kurayami's leftovers being utilized, of course, are the light and dark gameplay mechanics. Throughout the game, Garcia is forced to traverse the dark corridors to seek out areas of light for safety. Dark areas make the demons stronger and will gradually drain Garcia's life. In many cases, Garcia just has to shoot a light shot at a goat head to generate light for the area. In this sense, a fraction of the initial concept for the gameplay was used, but with all the violence, eroticism, and guns, it's so far away from what Suda had envisioned that it's no wonder that he denied Kurayami was in development at all. So we finally arrived at the EA segment of this retrospective. You might be thinking, oh, EA must have took control of the project from Grasshopper and ruined the IP forever. How did you guess? I didn't even finish this video. Please keep watching. In 2008, Grasshopper was given an opportunity to work under EA's brand new Partners program, which was dedicated to publishing titles created by third-party studios. Keep this in mind, this partnership happened just a few months before he showed off concept art for Kurayami to Grasshopper at their 10th anniversary party. It seemed as if Suda was under the impression that his dream of Kurayami was finally going to happen by working with Electronic Arts. Why is it always the pretty ones that fall for the bad boys? Is this why on the Japanese box art they covered up Paula's butthole with the EA logo? Was it symbolism? According to the man himself, Shadows of the Dam took 3 years to develop, a fairly long time for a game. It changed completely from our initial plan. Originally, the main character, Garcia, was going to start out topless and without a gun. From there, he would gradually acquire weapons and move around by shining a light into dark territories. That was the axis for the project. To play devil's advocate, EA maintained that this partnership wasn't about trying to tone down or westernize Suda. So, here's some examples where EA toned down and westernized Suda. You f***s.
Could you sort of walk us through some of the main features and how it's just so different.
Yeah, absolutely. So Shadows of the Dam is a psychological action thriller brought to you by like the great team from Grasshopper Manufacturer. So we've got Suda 51, which of course you know him from No More Heroes, and then you've got Shinji Mikami, who you know from Resident Evil, and then of course on the audio side you got Yamoka-san from Silent Hill. So there's a great collaboration there with Grasshopper, and then on the EA's, and then on top of that, collaborating with EA to sort of, you know, bring it all together and westernize it for a worldwide audience, and westernize.
However, working with a big publisher, Electronic Arts, they told us that Westerners are about guns, so give them a gun. And the direction of the project turned 180 degrees. EA is a really macho company, and we argued with them as we developed it. Their demands were strong. Straight out of the horse's mouth, EA demanded that Suda incorporate gunplay in the game, despite his reservations. Of course, knowing what we do now about Suda's development process, he would insist on a more innovative approach to gunplay, and would build the gun mechanics from scratch. Finally, the Kurayami project had a prototype that was then presented to EA. Now, with the addition of gun mechanics added, Paula was originally designed as a tiny girl who lived in your gun. I was thinking of a weapon called a monitor gun. When you set up the gun, first a monitor would pop out and her face would appear. She was kind of like the main character's partner. When we used the gun's laser scope, this tiny girl would transfer and hop around like a rabbit or flutter like a butterfly. It was a cute sight, which I really liked. But EA asked, why is there a bunny hopping around? And what are you trying to make? I don't get it. So the girl living in the gun was scrapped. Johnson, the talking skull, is a remnant of this idea. That game went through about 5 different versions. As we got closer to a game that EAP could accept, those meetings felt like court interrogations. Now, I don't have the actual contracts between EA and Grasshopper to read from, so I don't know what specific conditions the EA Partners program placed upon Grasshopper specifically. However, I managed to get a little insight from another source that was also working inside the EA Partners program at the time of Shadow's development. American McGee and his studio Spicy Horse were developing American McGee's Alice Madness Returns, which was coincidentally released just a week before Shadows of the Damned. When researching a little bit about that game, I found an interesting live stream where American McGee describes the financing of Alice and the creative control EA had over the project through the EA Partners program.
This game, Alice Madness Returns, we had to do a really funky finance setup in order to make it so it was palatable to EA. Even though you would think EA has tons and tons of money and they should be spending all that money on making new games, what EA wants and what they need to promise to their investors as far as funding games goes is the idea that there is going to be a guaranteed return. For every dollar they put into a game, in development and marketing, their internal expectation is that they might get $10 back. But what they did was they found a method of finance. It's called bond finance, which is typically used for financing film productions, because obviously film productions are also very expensive. And so what it means is that EA uses its line of credit at a bank in order to get a loan from that bank, and then the sort of structure of the deal is that as long as we hit our milestones, the bank pays us along the way. And actually, under that sort of situation, EA does not have control, because what they do is they agree early on to our schedule, our design, so that way they can't come in and mess up our schedule and our design and throw us off of our milestone. And unfortunately, because of that deal and the way we had handled ourselves throughout development by telling EA, well, we're not going to listen to you, we don't have to listen to you, when it got to the end, they kind of said, well, we don't have to listen to you either. So it sort of went both ways, and the game got put out in the form you see it in now.
Now, from what I've gathered, as long as McGee's studio kept the agreed upon development schedule, EA couldn't control the game, which sounds pretty good. Was this deal also in place for Grasshopper? Well, it would make perfect sense if that were the case. Here, we have a large publisher offering this amazing deal by promising a small Japanese studio that up until this point had no prior experience making games in the Unreal Engine, or games in high definition for that matter, freedom to make whatever they want, as long as they maintain the development schedule agreed by both sides without any delays. But in the extremely likely scenario Grasshopper didn't meet their milestones on time, EA could step in and take control away from them. This is just food for thought, okay? A brain exercise. Please don't sue me, EA. We ended up drafting the entire scenario 5 times before it was completed. In the end, each was so unique that I had basically written 5 different games.
We rehauled and redid the script about 5 times, and the 5th version is what ended up becoming Shadows of the Damned. So each time I rewrote the script, we'd have to redo the character, because that's just sort of a habit of mine. Also, EA kept telling me over and over, fix this, redo this. If I ever happened to work with EA on another game, I'd really appreciate if they would just okay the first version of the script next time.
The first of the abandoned drafts became the Kurayami dance manga, and it's the closest in terms of the initial idea for Kurayami. Suda confirmed in the Art of Grasshopper Manufacture that the second of the abandoned drafts for Shadows became Black Knight's Sword, which is about a Black Knight solving puzzles to reach the Dark Princess's castle, and more on that later in a future B-side. Now, I speculate that perhaps one of the other drafts may have been the scrapped Lily Bergamo project, which was then eventually turned into Let It Die. There's just something about the concept art that screams Kurayami, but this is just speculation. I imagine how frustrating it must have been for Suda to go back to the drawing board 5 times in the span of 3 years, only to be told to start over, with each subsequent time dumbing down the premise to be more marketable for EA.
No development's ever perfect, so what obstacles have yet to come across?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, as with great design, it's sort of coming to an understanding of what you're going to make. So, and it's basically, you know, we've got this developer who's very meticulous in their approach to gaming, but then they're open-ended in sort of the, you know, story and design and that aspect. So it's kind of like bringing a compromise on both.
In the very final 5th draft, it turned into a love story. EA informed us there's this thing called an elevator pitch in America, and if you can't tell your story in the length of an elevator ride, Hollywood won't use it. All of their stories fall into one of 4 categories. They said they wanted us to choose one of those and write our story. At first I thought, what? But one of the options was a love story. I hadn't written one before, so I decided to make a love story in hell. Even with all the constant attempts to change Shadows into another Resident Evil 4, EA still didn't know how to market the game.
You're playing as the hero, Garcia Hotspur, and Garcia is trying to find his girlfriend, which was kidnapped by the Lord of the Demons, Fleming. And this is a twisted and sick version of hell, brought to you by Suda51 and Mikami-san. So this is not your regular hell. This is their version of hell, which basically is filled with demons, and you have to withstand obstacles such as darkness and figure out how to get through these puzzles in order to save your girlfriend.
What's even sadder about this whole situation is that I believe Suda tried to tell the truth about what happened during this partnership at the time of its release, but he either didn't want to rock the boat or was under some strict NDA to prevent telling people about what really went on. Actually, EA has always respected our punk rock style. It was really easy, and we had a lot of for freedom. EA is not just a giant corporation, but they're very accepting. He said that Grasshopper pitched the game to EA, though later in the same interview, he told us that it was EA's request that the game became a shooter. Once again, it was Mr. Truth Bomb dropping sparkly sequin hat himself, Shinji Mikami, trying to put a good spin on this whole situation. What makes him happiest about Shadows of the Damned in retrospect is that the team at Grasshopper learned how to use the Unreal Engine. However, later in the same interview, he admitted Suda's vision and direction and EA's vision and direction were totally opposite. Just after the launch of the game, Eurogamer pressed Suda about the partnership with EA, and a funny little incident happened during the interview. Perhaps tellingly, a PR man swoops in and shuts the conversation down when we ask if publisher EA could have done more to support the project.
Yeah, there were actually a lot of sort of differences between EA marketing and my opinions about what should happen. And I got in some trouble about this because at some point I came out, I think it was during an AMA or a Reddit, like a Reddit AMA, and I said something along the lines of EA tricked the consumers by convincing them that the Alice game we were making was more of a horror game than it ultimately was. And they were, during production, trying to push us to make it more M-rated and to make it more of a horror game, which was interesting because during the production of the first Alice game, actually that Alice 1, was the first M-rated title that EA had ever done. And at that point in history, they wanted us to dial it back. And of course, if you played the first Alice and you saw the box of the first Alice, you'll remember she had the Vorpal blade with blood on it. And after the EA CEO at that point saw that box, he said, "We will not be known for making games like this," and they switched the box to her holding the ice wand, and that was to appease this sense that like they'd gone too far in making an M game. So second time around, they were pushing us to make it more M, to make it more bloody, to make it more horrific, and I was having to push back in that direction to say that's not really what it's supposed to be. So
the whole fiasco of Suda51 boiling down his broad ideas into the length of an elevator ride truly puts this scene from Shadows into a new perspective for me.
So big.
Yeah, so it is third-person action, and the player uses it's an action-oriented game, and you're accompanied by your sidekick Johnson, which is a former demon who's going to help you along your way. And you can use him as a melee weapon to kill enemies, but also he transforms into different types of weapons to your advantage. For example, transforms into a pistol-like weapon called the Boner because it shoots bones.
Shadows of the Damned is perfect in every way. There's nothing wrong with it that I can think of, except for all of the things that I can think of that's wrong with it. So let's talk about those things, shall we? Now, I maintain that Grasshopper did their very best to make lemonade with all the demands put in place by EA. It is a fun ride all throughout. Stepping away from my love for the game for a minute and looking at what remained, I thought I'd take some time out and share some theories as to what was cut to finish the game, or some of the more nitpicky things that just stuck out to me. I still feel that many elements of Shadows were just painted on top of existing assets of Kurayami.
You know, this is Suda51's version of Hell, which is kind of a demon city that kind of looks like old Eastern European.
Almost every asset in the game looks pinned on to Kurayami's corpse. Nothing looks consistent. Nothing makes sense. Just take a look around. Bloody meat walls, corpses strewn all about, and then we have billboards of demon hookers with pussy portals. I can't decide if the game wants me to laugh or cower in terror most times. This constant shift in tone is just unnerving. It's like the game doesn't know what it wants to be. It's just really hard to buy into the whole romance storyline when we're introduced to Paula several times throughout the game, and then she's killed, and then she's alive again, and then she's she's killed, and then she's alive again, and then she's killed, and then she's alive again, and then she's killed, and then she's alive again.
Garcia,
Daniel?
I found you at last. My love, I want to hold you.
Garcia, stay back!
Fuck you!
Shadows of the damned, I'll destroy with light.
And spoiler alert, she's also the final boss. And then you fall in love with her again. Oh, and then she tries to kill you.
Here we go again.
Now, I've already mentioned all the highlighted doorways that they implemented to guide the player around by the hand, but I forgot to emphasize how often this occurs in Shadows. Some of the maps look like a child's first Garry's Mod creation, with all the highlighted boxes and barrels littering the field. I just wish they would give it a rest for a minute. There's no reason to backseat game me all the way through. I mean, once something's established, you shouldn't have to reintroduce these concepts up until the final bits of the game. Shoot the goat head, I get it, I've done it 100 times by now. As a result of all this shiny stuff on the field and crying baby doors, the atmosphere just feels compromised. And I never feel like I have time to take in all the details that were put into Shadows. Hey look, a hidden door out and shoot it. Oh, boxes, shoot them. Just some machine gun ammo. Oh, there's a portrait up there, I bet somebody spent weeks on it, but I wonder if there's any more boxes. Another little odd quirk I notice is that for some reason you can't skip cutscenes at all, which can be a problem for multiple playthroughs, and I'm one of those guys who did. I don't know if this is a common bug, but when I was mashing the start button in the opening prologue trying to skip the opening cutscene, it froze the game. I had to hard reboot my Xbox to get things running again, and then watch the cutscene all over. We're introduced to a shirtless Garcia that's having a heated exchange with this goat demon down here. The demon vows to get his revenge and that he'll quickly be replaced by another.
Kill me, and I shall be replaced by another, and another, and another still.
But this is the last time we see him. This looks like a very detailed character model for just one short scene. Was Garcia meant to see him again? Was he some sort of cut boss fight? And don't accidentally mistake Claus here for George's demon form. They're two entirely separate demons. The first time you gain control of Garcia is in his apartment hallway. It's the only time where he's shirtless, much like the Kurayami concept. His character model has detailed tattoos that give an occultic darker side to Garcia that's sadly never explored because they are covered up for the rest of the game. Perhaps this was due to another mechanic that was cut out last minute? You see, Garcia was initially planned to transform into some sort of demon at one point in development. I'm not sure if it was in a Devil Trigger fashion or story-centric, but I would have welcomed this design. It looks pretty cool. This segment is also home to one of the worst camera angles and cuts I've ever seen. Look at that neck. Overall, I really enjoyed the cozy atmosphere of Garcia's apartment. It's one of the sparse moments where we get a glimpse into the demon hunter's life. Shadows has a lot of neat little set pieces spread throughout the game like this, which compels me to wonder what's up with all his set dressing if it's not gonna lead to anything. One of the most basic issues I have with this game are the controls. The aim is mapped to the L1 and shoot to R1 on the PS3, and you cannot remap the controls. Strangely, it's mapped differently on the Xbox 360 version, wherein the left trigger is aim and the right trigger is fire. That feels like a natural layout to me, and I wonder why this difference exists between the systems at all. Another odd thing that they included in the game is a bullet cam that sometimes happens whenever you get a headshot, and sometimes it won't. For whatever reason, it triggered more frequently for me on the 360 version, but that may be a result of better controls. I'm still not sure. We meet Fleming, which is our central antagonist, and here's our love triangle for the rest of the game. Oddly enough, Suda based the structure of the romantic plot around Super Mario Brothers, and I guess in this situation, Fleming represents Bowser, and he refers to Paula as
You see, the little peach is coming on to me.
Fleming is a big guy with a bow staff that's probably made out of a demon penis or something, I don't know. They don't really explain anything about him other than he's the Lord of the Demons, so I guess we gotta fight him. Garcia shoots him with a light shot. Fleming flies out the window and lands into one of the many portals that you'll be seeing throughout the rest of the game. Garcia grabs his jacket, covers up those cool tattoos, and he ends up on a highway, and we're introduced to Johnson. Garcia throws Johnson and turns him into the Johnson Cycle, which has such a cool design that's also wasted for the rest of the game. Was the Johnson Cycle another case of presumably cut content? Did Grasshopper have plans to incorporate a motorcycle chase sequence? I mean, you can even see Garcia squash a few demons here and there as he rides on. Why bother having Garcia drive to the underworld gate when he can just place a portal? Just another tease without a payoff, unfortunately. Also, what's up with the music in the PS3 version sounding like it was recorded inside of a tin can? It sounds terribly compressed, and this is especially noticeable if you play with headphones like I do. To my knowledge, this issue only exists on the PS3 version. The Xbox 360 version sounds studio quality. So what's the reason for this compression? The PS3 version comes on a Blu-ray disc and is entirely capable of holding uncompressed audio. Just look at Metal Gear Solid 4, half the game is installing those audio files. There's just no excuse for this, and it's a big slap in the face to Akira's masterful composition. The game follows the same formula. Kill demons, shoot sources of light with your light shot, find keys to open gates, and fight a boss. It works just fine and is very enjoyable. Though the puzzle solving elements are few and far between, I truly enjoy the light and dark gameplay mechanics, only I wish they would have developed them a tad more. In Shadows, you can find red gems, or you can purchase red gems from Christopher for white gems. Red gems are the hidden objects in this game, and they're used to upgrade Garcia. The upgrading paths are bare bones and lacking variety. Shit, even Open Season had a more developed tree than this. You only get to improve minor attributes like health, reloading speed, or ammo capacity, stuff like that. But you don't get any new abilities that change up your gameplay style or modify Garcia's appearance like in the Kurayami pitch. Unfortunately, all the weapons you receive are forced upon the player in a linear fashion right after you find a blue gem, usually after a boss fight. You're given no say in this matter. You can't find any additional weapons beyond the handgun, machine gun, shotgun, and the torch. There's no hidden weapons, post-game unlockables, or secrets to find beyond the red gems. There's not even an ultimate weapon that you get like the rocket launcher from Resident Evil. Most of the fun found in Resident Evil 4 was trading gold with the mysterious merchant and choosing from a variety of different guns per game session. There There are choices to make between the style of handgun, shotgun, TMP, or sniper rifle that players can make to match their playstyle. You're only given a finite amount of money and space, so you make a choice on what to keep or what to forego this time around. You can even forego all guns and do an egg-only playthrough if you want to. I did. The freedom of choice in Resident Evil 4 is what makes that game timeless and why Shadows of the Damned feels like the same experience each subsequent time through. Maybe these limitations were put into place due to the gun acting as a Swiss Army knife that's used to solve most of the puzzles in Shadows. Affording the players too much freedom could potentially interfere with the extremely rigid structure of the game, and nobody wants that, right?
You know, the content is really crazy. I mean,
as I've mentioned, this is the first time these developers ever worked in the Unreal Engine, and oh boy does it show. I encountered so many moments where the game would randomly bug out and I just got an instant death for standing in the wrong area with no indication that it was the wrong area. And the exact opposite scenario happened where I was given unlimited health and Garcia just stood there taking it until I turned off the console. Not to mention the texture pop-in. After texture pop-in, oh hi Garcia. My absolute biggest gripe with the game are the boss fights. Throughout the game, you encounter what they call the VIP demons, all of which have fairly disturbing backstories that Garcia can read about.
Why don't you go jack off to some bird porn? I bet you do more fapping than flapping.
It's established early on that each of the VIPs have a human form and a beast form. The first example of this is George Reed. You fight his human form first, and then a couple of stages later, he eats his own heart, which turns him into a full-on demon. Out of all the boss fights, his feels the most complete to me. Then you fight one of the three Sisters Grimm. I've got no problems with these fights. They're quite fun and they build off of one another moving on. Then comes the introduction to Elliot Thomas, who's also known as the Stinky Crow, which is possibly the most annoying build-up to a fight, but before you get the chance to shut him up on your own, he's murdered by a throwaway character named Colonel, or X. Colonel X is a bounty hunter that's seeking revenge for the murder of his wife. And that's it, because he's killed shortly thereafter by Elliot, and he's never mentioned again. Was there supposed to be more to Colonel X in the original game? They set up his whole story in the very beginning of the game and then they just kill him off shortly after meeting him. Was Colonel X intended to be a boss fight or a potential companion? Guess we'll never know. Maybe Elliot's human fight was cut out entirely to serve up this brief introduction and conclusion of Colonel X's storyline. How fun, I would have rather fought him myself, but okay. The most egregious example found in the game is Justine. She's introduced in the first stage of the game. She's singing opera, shattering windows, causing earthquakes. She looks like she poses a true threat. All throughout, you see her dancing around or flying around on rocket boots. Out of all the VIPs, they spend more time teasing Justine's fight, more so than any other enemy in the game, including Fleming. Once further, we are not given a proper Justine human fight, but instead we square off against a giant barfing paper Justine, which sounds good on paper. Once again, why spend all that time building up jetpack boots and earthquakes caused by her opera singing if you never intended on it going anywhere? It's my theory that the village cathedral was going to be the battleground for the Justine fight. You fight your way through this village, gathering all these keys, watching Justine carry away Paula, and when you show up and you think you're going to face off against her, she tongue fucks you and escapes through the back door. Now I have reason to believe that they had planned for more varieties of demons than what we were given. What we were given was fine, but I would have liked to see some of the stuff they had already finished implemented into the gameplay. Take for instance these flying demons that we see in the final cutscene. This is a real-time render like all the cutscenes in the game, so in that sense the flying demons were already completed. Why not use them? I just wish that Grasshopper would have considered using some of those animal hybrid demons that Silent Hill designer Masahiro Ito had created for the game. This guy looks so cool and I don't even get to fight him? Nitpicking aside, I think there are some truly clever concepts in the game that I wish they were given more time to expand upon. If we ever would have gotten that Akira Yamoka Wet Dream sequel that we were promised for a minute, I would have bought it on day one. Sadly, for many gamers, there's just no reason to go back and revisit Shadows of the Damned. There's no post-game content with the exception of unlocking a harder mode. There's no additional weapons, costumes, you can't even carry over any of your gems from your previous playthrough, and you can't revisit any previous chapters in like a chapter select. These are very basic things that have been around forever. It's a crying shame what happened here, because Shadows was generally loved by the people who gave it a chance, myself included. EA failed to market this game to the mainstream audience they were so desperately chasing. There was no commercials on TV giving the layman any idea of its existence, or even a basic demo available for people to try out on their own. As a result, Shadows only sold a paltry 24,000 copies in the first month of release. Wow, dude, way to go. So what have we learned here? All of the attempts to stifle new innovations in the medium of gaming by replacing them with guns were for nothing. Instead of opting to utilize the talent they had hired to their fullest artistic capabilities to make a new contribution to the medium, they pigeonholed Suda at financial gunpoint into making a product to appeal to a mass market that was never going to buy it in the first place. Shadows of the Damned, the Untold Story, unfortunately, is a tale as old as time. On June 21st, 2021, Shadows of the Damned celebrated its 10th anniversary, and I thought I would create a chapter to talk about the new developments regarding its legacy. First up, in January of 2017, Shadows was added to the backwards compatibility program on the Xbox series of consoles. I'm pulling it on my Series X for this capture. This version contains all the uncompressed audio of the 360 version. It enabled VSync, which gets rid of the pesky screen tearing that existed in both the PS3 and 360 versions. If you're playing on a high-resolution monitor, it upscales the game to 4K output, and the Series X includes Auto HDR, which detects areas of high luminance, which provides brighter lights and finer details. The detail and care put into the textures of this game is something that can be truly appreciated when playing on a modern system and display. I should also mention that the loading times have been improved drastically. On the Series X, it only takes 6 seconds to load the first map, whereas the PS3 version takes an additional 30 seconds to load the first map. Now, at the time of this video, Shadows of the Damned has been officially delisted from the Microsoft Store. Now, why it got delisted in the first place is anyone's guess, but a very likely scenario is that after the 10-year mark, the publishing deal between EA and Grasshopper Manufacture expired. In my research, I found a trademark filing for Shadows of the Damned that was posted on Tuesday, February 2nd of 2021, the same day that Microsoft announced the delisting. Grasshopper is listed as the trademark owner. Could this mean a possible sequel or a remaster of Shadows in the near future? Let's just say our chances got a lot better. Secondly, I should mention that the Kurayami dance manga has now been translated into English. You can read both volumes at believeinthe.net/kurayami.html. I'm not going to sit here and do a verbatim retelling of both mangas for you, because overall Kurayami Dance only appeals to a very niche demographic of people interested in the Sudaverse, and outside of a few cameos of other Suda characters like Tokyo Morishima, Edo McAllister, and Travis Touchdown, it's pretty much a self-contained story that you really don't need to read unless you're interested in manga. The early concept art of Garcia does appear in the manga as a character named G, but this time he runs around in a Speedo for the majority of the book. If you enjoy the randomness of Suda's storytelling and want to see some familiar faces pop up from time to time, then check it out. It's free. Last, but certainly not least, it's time to talk about one of the greatest surprises I've ever experienced in video games. I don't want to ruin this for anyone who hasn't played Travis Strikes Again. Please, check the game out before watching this part. There's really not a short way to summarize what Travis Strikes Again is all about. In many ways, it's a love letter from Suda51 to fans of his previous games. There's so many cameos and references to his previous games that even the most hardcore of Grasshopper fans might have trouble with placing the reference at times. TSA is the most introspective that Suda51 has ever gotten, and if you read between the lines of the scatological musings you encounter and relate it back to Suda, you may come away with a better understanding of the man behind the myth. In Travis Strikes Again, Travis and Badman find themselves running through things called death balls, which are used on an unreleased video game console called the Death Drive Mark II. If Travis and Badman are able to collect all 6 death balls and complete the corresponding games, then one wish will be granted by this tiger god here. The Death Drive Mark II and the Death Balls were created by Dr. Juvenile. Throughout the game, you learn about Dr. Juvenile's development of the Death Drive Mark II in all the individual games. In TSA, there also exists another game called Travis Strikes Back, which acts as a visual novel interim in between each Death Ball world. You play through a chapter of this visual novel, and by the end, Travis walks away with a brand new Death Ball. Here's where things get crazy. Scenario 5 of Travis Strikes Back is called Hell's Chainsaw. Travis and his cat Jean are on the way to retrieve the next death ball from a real asshole named Damon Riccatello, who's the CEO of a tech company called Utopia. There he meets Damon's secretary Juliet, who tips off Travis on Damon's current whereabouts. Upon arriving at the VIP room where Damon is located, Damon sicks his guards on Travis, whom quickly dispatches them in return. Travis demands Riccatello hand over the death ball that he stole from Dr. Juvenile. Here we learn the history of this particular death ball, which is named Serious Moonlight. We come to learn that Serious Moonlight was a passion project of Dr. Juvenile. Riccatello had his own ideas for what Serious Moonlight should have been, so he gathered other members of the development team and turned them against Dr. Juvenile. The Serious Moonlight project was thereby cancelled, and then for no reason at all, Riccatello beats the absolute shit out of Dr. Juvenile and wrangles the death ball from her grasp. In a visceral reaction to hearing that story, Travis beats Damon Riccatello into a bloody mess, spares his life, and then takes the Serious Moonlight death ball. Riccatello vows revenge on Travis to possibly reappear in No More Heroes 3. Returning to Travis's trailer, you can read an excerpt from a gaming magazine which speculates that the game is going to be a grand-scale open-world RPG, but specific details about the game are still shrouded in mystery. All the reporter knows is that the devs were locked in a room and forced to work on the game for an entire year. In a nutshell, this entire page is a bunch of speculatory bullshit based on the title screen, and it does nothing to prepare you for what's about to happen. Travis and Badman insert the death ball and fall into the world of Serious Moonlight.
Fuck! Shadows of the Damned! Oh my god!
Enter Garcia and Johnson riding down the highway to the underworld, fleeing from a flock of winged demons that we last saw in the ending of Shadows of the Damned. This is a bittersweet reunion with our old friend as he's quickly impaled by the horde of demons. Then a scar-faced angel in a tuxedo unloads a golden gun into Garcia. Hold up, this guy looks really familiar. Was this guy based on the original concept art for Garcia Hotspur? Now that's a deep cut. Before he dies, Garcia throws Johnson into the air, and as a dying wish, he asks Johnson to become a hero of his own, known as 8 Hearts. And that's our setup for the game within a game within a game, known as Damned Dark Knight. Travis is just as surprised as the rest of us. Here he was expecting a AAA fantasy RPG, but instead is dropped into the world of Shadows of the Damned, a game that he beat 6 years prior. Damned Dark Knight has Travis fighting his way through the underworld in reverse order this time, starting starting with Fleming's castle and making his way back to the gates of the underworld. Along the way, Travis will meet up with NPCs, which are essentially developer commentary nodes. Who's the developer in question? Is it Dr. Juvenile or Suda51? We learned that Dr. Juvenile had originally set out to make a AAA open-world RPG, but her ideas were too grand scale for the technology at the time and were immediately shot down. Deja fucking vu. When I first played this, it was quite the surreal experience to say the least, because I heard some of the points I made in my Shadows retrospective repeated back to me almost verbatim. Justine, Fleming's beloved songstress. No one who has ever heard her sing opera has ever come back alive. She stands before Garcia, giving the sense of a huge boss fight to come, and the battle turns out to be 2D. It's not like it's the first time I've heard my points about Shadows of the Damned regurgitated back to me, and I'm certain it won't be my last. There's a showdown between 8 Hearts and Travis on the highway to the underworld, and if you're playing on spicy mode, it can be one of the most challenging fights in the game. Midway through the battle, the soul of Garcia Hotspur appears and infuses his powers into 8 Hearts, but it's no use because Travis still fells his foe with one spectacular suplex.
You win!
Travis spares 8 Hearts' life, and the soul of Garcia shows up to tell 8 Hearts that he's still alive, but he was banished to the 4th dimension, and that 8 Hearts should travel over to the 4th dimension so together they can fight Fleming's son, who is the angel guy with the gun in the intro. He is right, Garcia. Someday we'll go on a journey of battle together once again. I'm not sure what a journey of battle is, but it sounds like a sequel to me. Okay, so let's break down what this all means. The sub-story of the creation of Serious Moonlight is Suda's own recounting of the facts surrounding the development of Shadows of the Damned back when he was partnered with EA. Much like Serious Moonlight, Shadows of the Damned was initially a game called Kurayami, which was a large open-world RPG, and a very ambitious project that he had trouble communicating to the higher-ups at EA. A man by the name of John Riccatello served as the CEO of EA back during the time when Kurayami and thereafter Shadows of the Damned were being developed. Remember Damon Riccatello, who beat the shit out of Dr. Juvenile when she was making her passion project, which forced her to kill her dream and make a Shadows of the Damned game? Do you remember that Damon Riccatello was the CEO of a company called Utopia? Did you know that since 2014, John Riccatello became the CEO of Unity Technologies? Utopia, Unity, Damon Riccatello, John Riccatello? What can I say, guys? He's Suda51, not Subtle51. Now begs the question if the scene where Travis beats the shit out of Damon Riccatello is an act of passive aggression or direct aggression. Either way, Riccatello, you better watch that b-hole. Suda's coming for it. I tried to get some insight about the development of Damn Dark Knight. I wondered how long Suda had been planning this surprise.
The budget for that game was large, and the amount of craft that went into the map meant we were left with a great final product. I thought, I'm definitely going to reuse that world sometime, and when I saw the illustrations sent over for the character of 8 Hearts in TSA, I immediately thought, that's Johnson. Boneface had drawn the character without any knowledge of the game, so it was all a complete coincidence. Because of that, I thought I'd use that world. I also thought it would give players a surprise.
It was just a beautiful moment of happenstance that created one of my favorite memories in all of Suda51's games. I'm glad he's finally expressed himself about his trials during Kurayami. Even if it was presented in his signature roundabout fucked up Suda way, it gave me some much needed closure on this project and inspired some hope within my heart that it won't be the last time we see this wonderful franchise. I want to thank everyone for listening this long to this video. This was a long time in the making and one of my most cherished projects that I ever researched. Big shoutouts to everyone who watched Shadows of the Damned: The Untold Story back when it first premiered on January 13th of 2018. Let me know you watched this far by putting January 13th, 2018 down in the comments below. Just put it anywhere inside your comment. Doesn't matter the context, reply to other people with the date January 13th, 2018. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.